Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're exploring a discovery that, honestly, completely rewrote our understanding of ancient history. Okay, let's dive into this, because this is the unbelievable story of a massive, hidden underground army. An army that silently protected a powerful, long-dead emperor for over 2 millennia. This isn't just a story about a bunch of ancient statues, you know? It's a wild tale of ambition, a desperate quest for eternal life, and an empire built through sheer, brutal warfare. We're going to unpack exactly how and why this colossal undertaking happened, and what it actually tells us about one of the most fascinating rulers in human history.
I want you to picture this for a second. It's March 1974. You live near Xi'an in China, and you're just out in your local fields digging a well. You're expecting to hit water, right? But instead, your shovel strikes something hard, pieces of clay. Now, at first, you'd probably just think you've uncovered some old, broken pottery, but as experts rushed in and excavations got underway, row after row of life-sized clay warriors literally emerged from the dirt. These farmers had accidentally stumbled upon one of history's greatest archaeological sites. For centuries, local people had been living, working, and farming directly above this enormous ancient wonder, completely unaware of the massive army lurking just beneath their feet.
Let's move to and see how this builds. To figure out how this hidden army got there, we really need to rewind the clock. More than 2,200 years ago, China wasn't the single, united country we know today. It was totally fractured into powerful kingdoms locked in over 250 years of relentless, brutal conflict. This was known as the Warring States period. Millions died as these kingdoms battled for ultimate control. Then, in 246 BC, a 13-year-old boy became king of the Qin state. Almost immediately, he starts building his tomb. But get this, he wasn't just planning for his death, he was prepping for absolute conquest. By 221 BC, his incredibly disciplined armies had crushed every rival. He united China for the very first time, becoming Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor.
Now, Qin Shi Huang was a guy with some unbelievable accomplishments. He standardized writing, linked up the defensive walls that would eventually become the Great Wall, and built huge infrastructure. But his mind was actually deeply divided. On one hand, he was absolutely terrified of dying. Obsessed with finding immortality. He sent whole expeditions across the oceans looking for mythical islands of immortals and ordered alchemists to brew up special medicines to help him live forever. But here is the tragic irony. A lot of those so-called elixirs contained fatal amounts of mercury, which most likely sped up his death. Because he couldn't conquer death in this world, he ended up pouring his limitless resources into preparing to rule in the next one.
Take a second and just look at that number. 700,000. Ancient records indicate that nearly 700,000 workers labored on the emperor's mausoleum project for decades. Think about the sheer, mind-boggling scale of that workforce. That is basically the population of a major modern city, entirely dedicated to building a tomb for one single man. The logistics, the food required to feed everyone, the massive engineering, it's almost beyond comprehension. This wasn't just some burial pit. It was literally the largest public works project of its era, and the whole shebang was hidden right below the surface of the earth.
The entire goal of this massive workforce was to create a flawless imperial underground palace. You see, the first emperor wanted his underground kingdom to perfectly mirror the world he ruled above ground. He didn't just want a coffin. He wanted his roads, his rivers, his treasures, his officials, and his musicians all down there with him. Now, in earlier ancient times, it wasn't uncommon for rulers to actually have living soldiers and servants buried alongside them. But here, instead of burying a real army alive, incredibly skilled craftsmen were tasked with creating an invincible, massive clay military force. This army's one and only purpose? To protect the emperor from his enemies in the afterlife.
And wow, they absolutely delivered on the size of that army. So far, archaeologists have uncovered more than 8,000 life-sized clay warriors. And we're not talking about small, delicate figurines here. These soldiers are incredibly imposing. They stand anywhere from 5 feet 8 inches to well over 6 feet tall. If you stand in the excavation pits today and look out over those thousands of towering, silent soldiers, you truly get a visceral sense of the immense power and intimidating presence that the first emperor commanded.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the unbelievable level of detail on every single figure. You'd probably expect an army of 8,000 clay statues to just be mass-produced from a single mold, right? Like giant cookie cutters, but they aren't. No two faces are exactly alike. Each and every warrior was given unique facial expressions, distinct hairstyles, very specific mustaches, and detailed armor. When you look at them, you can spot young recruits, battle-hardened veterans, some looking intensely serious, and others radiating this calm confidence. And get this, Originally, this entire army was painted in breathtaking, vivid colors. We're talking bright reds, blues, greens, and purples. But tragically, when they were finally excavated, the exposure to the modern air caused that gorgeous 2,000-year-old paint to dry up and peel away almost immediately.
But you know, the marvel of this army goes way beyond just individual artistry. These figures were placed in highly realistic military formations. The emperor's architects didn't just group them together randomly. They organized them precisely according to real Qin military strategy. You've got vanguards of archers, heavy infantry units, cavalry riders alongside roughly 600 clay horses, and over 100 chariots, complete with their drivers. Every single unit is meticulously positioned, facing east, totally ready to intercept any enemy approaching from the conquered lines. It is quite literally a brilliant military force, frozen in time.
And to make this ghostly army even more lethal, the soldiers weren't just holding fake clay weapons. Oh no, they were armed to the teeth with real ones. When they were excavated, many of the warriors were still tightly clutching actual bronze swords, spears, crossbows, and thousands of arrowheads. Astoundingly, a bunch of these bronze weapons remained incredibly sharp, even after being buried in damp soil for over 2 millennia. I mean, this completely blew modern researchers away. It's undeniable proof that the Qin Empire had highly advanced metalworking techniques. This technology was profoundly ahead of its time, and it gave them the exact edge they needed to conquer all of ancient China.
The Emperor's Hidden Tomb, a mystery preserved.
So we've talked a lot about the army guarding the tomb, but the actual resting place of Huang himself, that is hands down the most fascinating part of this entire explainer. Because despite decades of very careful digging, the emperor's central burial chamber remains completely sealed. It is an untouched mystery to this very day. For centuries, the only clues we had about what was actually inside came from the ancient historian Sima Qian, who wrote about the tomb about a century after the emperor died. He described a subterranean palace filled with just unbelievable wonders. And this brilliantly illustrates his point. He wrote that the tomb contained, quote, rivers and seas made of flowing mercury that were moved mechanically to simulate the flowing waters of the real world. For the longest time, historians just assumed Sima Qian was wildly exaggerating. An underground sea of liquid mercury? It sounded entirely like a fantasy.
But then, modern science entered the chat. Researchers recently conducted scientific surveys of the soil right around the massive unopened burial mound, and the results were absolutely shocking. They detected unusually high levels of mercury. We're talking levels that simply cannot be explained by natural environmental factors, so the data strongly suggests that the ancient historians' wild, fantastical descriptions of mercury rivers might actually be 100% true. The emperor, who literally drank mercury in life trying to cheat death, might now literally be surrounded by it in his eternal rest. How crazy is that?
So, the crucial point is, with such an incredible, historic prize sitting just out of reach, you're probably wondering, why on earth don't we just open it? Well, the answer really comes down to preservation. Archaeologists have made the deliberate and incredibly disciplined choice to leave the tomb alone. Remember what happened to the vivid paint on the terracotta warriors? The second it hit the air, it vanished. Current technology simply cannot guarantee that the priceless, super fragile artifacts inside the central chamber, things like ancient silks, texts, wood, and paints, will actually survive being exposed to our modern atmosphere. So they wait. They're making the tough call to prioritize the preservation of human history over our immediate curiosity.
Ultimately, the Terracotta Army is this incredibly powerful message from a hyper-ambitious ruler, a man who unified an entire civilization, but was absolutely terrified of his own mortality. But as expansive and breathtaking as those 8,000 excavated clay warriors are, we have to remember they are just the outer guard. This site is such a humbling reminder of just how much history is still hidden right beneath our feet, perfectly preserved in the dark. I mean, if a beautifully crafted, fully armed military force of this magnitude was just the perimeter defense, what secrets are still waiting in the dark at the very heart of the first emperor's tomb?